Ala Moana Regional Park on Oahu's South Shore is a popular destination for local residents. Activities include surfing, swimming, paddleboarding, tennis, walking, picnicking, or just relaxing. The city has a master plan to revitalize the park, but not everyone agrees with the plan or that the park needs revitalizing in the first place. Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Larry Amada. For decades, Ala Moana Beach Park has been the go-to park in Honolulu for everything from a quick run or swim to surfing to more leisurely family picnic maybe. The 100-plus acre park was dedicated all the way back in 1934, and it's showing a little age. So the city has devised a master plan to, quote, restore, revitalize, enhance, and improve the park, unquote, and would like to move forward. Critics are saying not so fast and would like more of a discussion. So that's what we're doing tonight. The representatives from the city, a skeptic of the plan, and we will also discuss a privately funded playground that has been added to the mix. So we look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can call or email or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. All right, now to our guest. Robert Croning is the director of the Department of Design and Construction for the City and County of Honolulu. Tiffany Vara is the executive director of Pa'ani Kākou, a nonprofit organization advocating for a 1-acre playground inside of the park. Salvatore Lanzalati is a photographer right now, but he retired after 30 years of public service with the University of Hawaii and under 3 mayors with the City and County of Honolulu. He recently wrote an op-ed piece about the proposed playground in Ala Moana Park that's published in the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. And Eugene Lee has been a member of Ala Moana since its inception, an organization that was formed 4.5 years ago to voice community concerns about the plan. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. You know, I got to admit, this is one discussion I've been looking forward to because you hear so much and you hear bits and pieces, but I myself, too, haven't heard the more recent plans. And so let's get everybody up to speed a little bit. And we'll start with you, Robert. Give us an overview of, right now, what the city has planned for the park.
Where we are right now is in the environmental impact statement phase. We've developed a master plan, and so we're analyzing the impacts of all the different components of that plan. There's quite a few elements to it, and actually some of the master plan elements that don't require the environmental look because of environmental laws and the maintenance posture of it. We're already starting. Like, we've irrigated both the main part of the park and Magic Island, so the grass will be greener. We've put in a volleyball court. We've planted a lot of trees. The other parts that we're working on that require the environmental assessment are things such as fixing the bridges across the canal, fixing the canal itself, enlarging one of the bridges, making it a wider access point at Pi'ikoi. Working on McCoy Pavilion, we're going to do a lot of renovations to that. We're looking at adding sand to the beach because it's a very rocky beach. One of the complaints we often get is there's not enough parking at the park, and so we're increasing the number of stalls. We're looking at putting a dog park in one of the underutilized parts of the park, and one that you've already mentioned is a playground. We're looking at putting a playground into the park.
And we'll definitely get a little bit more into that in just a little bit. So overall, what is the perspective right now of the city as to what needs to happen and why? And we just talked about it being just simply 1934, how many years ago that was. And so is the overall thrust of what the city is doing to just sort of upgrade and upkeep everything overall, in addition to a couple of new aspects to the plan. Is that the primary focus?
Certainly. We look at the park and we know it's one of the most used parks in the whole island, and one of the most famous parks. And it was in disrepair, and it had been neglected for many years. So one of the main efforts is to truly polish it up, get it looking a lot nicer, and do some of the basic elements of it. But throughout time, there's always been initiatives to maybe even improve it a little more by making it a little more inclusive than it is, adding a few things that would make it even more of a people's park. And that's what we talk about when we talk about things like the playground, an inclusive playground, a dog park. Those are things that are ideas that we think would help activate the park more and make it even more inclusive.
So I want to get to everybody else in just a minute here, but one more little question about that. So is also part of the thrust that some of it is considered not safe at this point in time? I know there have definitely been some concerns about that. Are some of the plans that you're including to address that in particular?
As I'm the director of design and construction, I'm dealing mainly with the construction aspects of it. What you're talking about is something that we are a little somewhat concerned about, and those are being taken care of by the Department of Parks and Recreation.
Which areas are we talking about that are of particular concern?
I don't know specifically, okay. And I don't think there's been a lot of issues, but we have added park rangers to the park, and so there's more patrols of park rangers that go through that. But I apologize, I'm not the expert in that area. We'd have to talk to the Parks and Recreation folk for the specifics on how they're being used.
So let's talk about this kind of splash new element here that has been added, the playground. So Tiffany, let's turn to you on that, because this is all part of Pa'anika Ko.
Yes.
So explain to people who are not familiar with it, haven't been listening to this conversation in recent months and years, what are we talking about here? What is the project?
So the project is for a 1-acre inclusive playground, and inclusive means designed with the needs of all children in mind, because 1 in 7 children have a disability or a difference in ability of some sort that makes it difficult or impossible to access play in a playground. And on Oʻahu, that equates to at least 22,000 children without a playground to play in.
So what are some of the elements, design elements? Share that with us.
There will be numbers of various types of swings, both individual and that several children could be on together, or children with mobility issues could enjoy. And we will be adding 2 special elements, I think, that have been a bit misunderstood perhaps, or miscommunicated by others. Something called a zip cruise.
I think we have some video of that. Okay. So we want to go ahead and roll that video. While you explain, we see it behind you.
It's been called a zip line even by us.
Okay.
It's been called a zip line. Tonight I'd like to use the correct name, which is a zip cruise, because there's important differences between it and a zip line. So you're not starting out at a higher elevation and going to a lower. You're not gaining a lot of speed. The children won't be high off the ground. They're basically about as high off the ground as they would be on a swing. And they're about the length of a tennis court, 77 feet from one end to the other. And one of the more inclusive elements of this playground, the adapted swing is important in providing 2 special things that aren't available to kids. For ones with mobility issues, that may be the first time they experience weightlessness, which is not only enjoyable, but an important developmental sensation for the body. And the second is the ability for all children to compete. I can tell you that my 4 sons would have loved to help get their sister in an adapted chair like that, hop on the other 2 zip cruises and say, ready, set, go. It's an even playing field.
So let's talk about the cost of this. How is this going to work out? Because if this obviously would add a significant amount of cost to what would happen.
All of the design and construction is being funded by donations from the community and by volunteer efforts. So that cost will not be added to the city. This is through a public-private partnership between our not-for-profit, which was founded to bring inclusive play to Hawaii, and the city.
And so what is then the plan? So if this were included in the plan and were approved and it happened,
right,
then what? What about the maintenance? What about potential liability?
Sure, that's a great question. It's something we spent a long time considering. In fact, we had to answer 3 important questions for ourselves first. First, is this possible? Can we raise the money to do it? Second, can we make sure it's safe day and night? And can it be sustainable over the long term? And maintenance is a part of that. And so as we gift it to the city, we've had ongoing discussions about that. From the not-for-profit side, what I can say is we are going to have warranties on the equipment as we turn it over to the city. And then it's maintained just like any other city park. And one more important aspect in the public-private partnership is that after we gift it back to the city, our not-for-profit will maintain the right but not the responsibility to maintain it. That is the city's. But just in case there's an incident of vandalism, say, and we have caution tape around an element that we want to see fixed quickly, and maybe that doesn't fit quite into the city budget at that time, we would be able to assist with that.
So I want to hear everybody's responses on this and your thoughts.
The city is fully supportive of it. I mean, we think it's great that we'll have this opportunity. Like I said, in the original master plan, we've always intended on it being a playground in that park. We think it's an important aspect of that park. It is a regional park. So when this opportunity came, we jumped at it. There will also be a facility there that we expect to put a concession in, which will also help fund some of the maintenance and so forth, and a place for HPD and the park rangers to be housed.
Your op-ed focused on this.
Yeah. I come from this from a very different point of view. I like to start from the inside out. I think this is this project is from the outside in. It's kind of grafted on. And so from the inside out, I look at Ala Moana Beach Park. It's a beach park. It's on an island surrounded by beautiful aquamarine water. I agree with Ms. Vara. I think that we need facilities for disabled keiki. I was the EEO officer in 1992 and was challenged with the first implementing of the ADA. American Disabilities Act. So I understand, and I understand it from a personal point of view, but I would like to see it taken care of as a beach park. For example, we have Access Surf out at White Plains Beach, and they bring, once a month, they have kids where they make them float, weightlessness. They help them on surfboards. They help them swim. So there are ways. You get online. Look at Melbourne, Victoria, Melbourne, Australia. They advertise that their beaches are accessible and inclusive. So the question isn't whether we should or not have these 22,000 kids be able to use Ala Moana Beach Park. The question is how. And so let's use it as what it really is, the resource that it is. It is a beach park. Let's then figure out, I mean, I remember when I started out, we had the first, the mats and the big wheelchairs with the big wheels, and we tried those out. That was primitive. That's back 1992. So here we are in 2019. Let's bring that up to date, and let's give these kids the and not just the kids, the kapunas, the veterans, anyone, give them the opportunity to get into the water. So let's do that. Then you have the other stuff, this zip cruise and all that stuff. This again is an amenity for the apartment buildings across the way, and for Mayor Caldwell to have Waikiki people to come over and use the park. We don't need, this is really something that ought to be in, and I'm not going to say I don't like it, or it's not a good idea, but we don't need a splash pad in a beach park. Because when that thing breaks and you can't get the money because you don't have enough money, that thing will look like the rock gardens that we have, those beautiful lava rock fountains that we had that are now just urban blight down in Waikiki, down in downtown in Chinatown. So let's if you want to have that kind of stuff, it belongs in our community park. And he's saying that this is something they want. No. Show me the DPR, the Parks and Recreation. Show me the master plan. Show me where they studied across the entire island, all the community parks on the island. Show me that they looked at all the community parks, all the regional parks, all the beach parks, and DPR, show me where DPR said, out of all the needs on the island in our parks, the most important thing is to put zip lines and splash pads in Ala Moana
Now, I know
Park.
I want and everybody wants to
It
comment.
doesn't exist.
I know they do, and I want to give
yeah, but
everybody
it
a
doesn't
chance
exist.
to, but I want to
Yeah.
make sure.
Sure, go ahead.
And hold your thoughts for a minute, but I want to make sure Eugene gets a chance to jump in here and get your thoughts, and then we'll kind of open it up here.
So it comes back to, my involvement is that the people weren't being heard. If you take the first line from even the website in terms of the People's Park, in terms of the guidelines, the guiding principles for this master plan, its efforts to improve the park are centered on maintaining local values. We also seek a community-based process that is transparent and inclusive. And I think some of these things, although we speak about this, but the EIS goes beyond that. The EIS in Hawaii, since 2000, the legislators state that it's not only the environmental, but it's the social, economic, and cultural effects of a plan. And I think what we've been hearing, although very emotional at times, is that those haven't been addressed in this, even the second EIS. And so our contention is that then comes in, all of a sudden the publicity, albeit a playground is great. I was involved in the Magic Bridge in Palo Alto, and it's a very inclusive, but it took community involvement. It took communication and compromise and working together, both in terms of the environmental, but also in terms of what features could be inclusive in a wonderful park. And so with that, that's sort of where it comes through. I mean, there are master plans and there were meetings that the administration had before, and sure, the park was, the playground was 9th on the list in terms of the areas that the consensus was that we need something there. Okay. I think now we are sure that a playground is needed. The question comes up, is it needed there? And what type of playground? And what would be the features in the playground?
If you would allow me to correct some of the things that have been said here. First of all, you keep calling Ala Moana a beach park. It is not a beach park. It is a regional park.
It's a regional beach park.
It is a regional park.
So
And
that
is why
there's no beach there?
there is a beach at the regional park. So it is a regional
And
park
why is that
where,
distinction important to you?
well, because it's not that important, but he's using it to say playgrounds shouldn't be at beach parks. Well, first of all, this isn't a beach park. It's a regional park. It's 100 acres also, and this thing only takes up an acre. So we don't understand why anybody would think it's not appropriate for this type of a park. It's very much appropriate for the park. Secondly, really, your accusations about, building this for the Park Place people, that is unsubstantiated and just flat out wrong. So
You don't know that it's wrong.
I know it's
You
wrong.
can't tell me it's wrong. You can tell me you think it's wrong.
Okay.
Right? And I can
then
tell you I think it's
the
right.
reason it's not that important to say it is a regional park, although it certainly fits a regional park environment. We do have playgrounds at beach parks, 11 of them around the island. So they're all over the place. So when you talk about DPR doing an analysis, they have plans. They have a vision for the island on how it should be. And there's just no legitimate reason why Ala Moana Regional Park should not have a playground there.
I know you want to jump in,
be
but
used.
I want to give Tiffany a chance to
Sure,
respond first.
that's
Hold your
fair.
thought.
That's
And
fair.
I'd like to just add on to Robert's response to some of your points. In calling it a beach park and saying the playground does not belong here, we also need to consider there's other non-beach amenities there, like the tennis courts and the lawn bowling area.
Tennis courts.
Right. Tennis courts.
You mean the ones I play on every day?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly, which is a
okay.
non-beach amenity that many people enjoy, and it's a
Yes.
great thing for people to be outside engaging with each other in healthy pursuits, which is exactly what we're going to create for these children on a footprint, actually, that is smaller than just the Mauka side of the tennis courts. And the splash pad that has been called a water park with slides and pools, it will have neither of those. And the size of it from one side to the other is about 53 feet. So it's 25 feet less than one of those tennis courts that you enjoy. And it's about 10% of the area of the lawn bowling. It could fit right in the corner of that other non-beach amenity in Ala Moana Beach Park.
My concern, my major concern with this whole idea is simply that the reason why I say it doesn't belong there is not that we can't have a playground, but that the issue is not that there's a playground, not a playground. The issue is that there are McNaughton and Kobayashi planned 15 buildings to come up in this area. Hughes plans another 14 to 16 buildings to come. This is between these, Kaka'ako area. We need more parkland. We don't need less. We don't need these people coming across into the People's Park and taking land because it's open. It's supposed to be open.
Who are these people when you say
Yeah,
this?
it sounds like you're being very exclusive.
No, I'm not being exclusive at all. What I'm saying is we need more parkland, not less parkland. The Kaka'ako plan of 2017 says that we're going from 2010, 10,000 some people, 600, to 40,000 people. In other words, 45, 46,000. 35,000 more people are going to move into this area. Now, what do we need? We need more park space, not less. If we take the same park space and we put these facilities and activities on them, and then we put 35,000 more people in this area, what do we have? We don't have the same park space. We have fewer park spaces. So the Kaka'ako plan has a keiki zone in it. And
This is part of your op-ed.
but let me add to it. Let me add to it. If we do things, but if we do things like property tax increments, community facility districts, business improvement districts, if we get these business people to long term have to pay up. And add that, just like New York and San Francisco and other places, we could take everything from Ward Avenue to Keawe Street that borders on Ala Moana, the Makai side, and take that, which is in front of the university, the medical and the children's discovery. We can make that all park, and then you drive down from the bridge when you come over Macaulay. You would have parkland all the way down.
Let me direct this just a little bit here because we need to get to some of these viewer questions, and so we'll get back to this. I know we can kind of keep circling back around.
If we don't have more parkland, we have fewer parkland.
Of what we do for this show here. So,
go ahead.
So here's from Tom in Waikiki. He says, I'm going to kind of string these together because they're related a little bit. What is this park's estimated maintenance cost? This is from Tom in Waikiki. Also, who's going to maintain the Zip Cruise 10 years from now? That's from Gary. Also kind of related from Helene. The second EIS, the playground resembles a, quote, theme park, and she personally objects to something that needs such supervision or maintenance. This seems like a commercial enterprise, which is something the public greatly fears in her mind. So how are you, I think people are still concerned about, who's going to really be, as we get down the road, who's going to continue to maintain this, who's going to be able to have the funds, is it going to be sustainable? I think the two of you maybe address that.
Right, and, okay, and so in the beginning we will obviously partner. We are going to order from the manufacturer the pieces and parts, the smaller ones that tend to wear out soonest, and have that in a stock. I spoke earlier about the warranties, at least 10 years, and then we'll go from there. This is a city park. It is going to require maintenance. And I guess part of the discussion should be, we'll build this at no cost. We're going to partner in some ways on continued maintenance. But what is the value of all children being able to play together? And why must it be zero forever? I don't agree with that, number one. And number two, responding to the other viewer question about the amusement park or theme park thing, I think that's a response to the false narrative that's been promoted often in the press over the past several months. And what we're building is a playground that will contain playground equipment found in thousands of playgrounds across this country.
So why not put that same equipment? Why not have the Department of Parks do a master plan of all our community parks all over the island and have them cost out over 5 years, 10 years? Why not? Why not? No. See, you're saying that either kids will play together or not. I'm suggesting that we find ways for that equipment, that inclusive equipment, to be all over the island so that people can come out of their homes after dinner and with their families in the communities.
We're in complete agreement on that. Complete agreement.
As is Tony, another viewer who says all parks should be under the same system across the island so everyone has the opportunity to enjoy
We are all
these
in complete agreement.
I want to get to you, Robert, in a minute, but I know Eugene needs a chance to jump in here because it's an important part of the community that you represent.
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, we agree with all this in terms of the conversation, that some of it has been, what has been I mean, take it from the movies and so forth. What are the optics? The optics through the press, as well as what has been presented even from the city, is that, you know, what is it actually? We have no definitive idea what the park's going to entail. I mean, it's great in terms of inclusive, in terms of using universal design and all these types of techniques that need to be involved, but also safety and the issues in terms of maintenance. I mean, not until this last couple of years that the administration has paid attention to the parks. Our parks have been dismal. The playgrounds, the play equipment, and I can't recall which community, but the community themselves had to go out and the families went and refurbished the playground. You know, is this the type of thing that we're looking at? I mean, I appreciate the, you know, in terms of the introduction, in terms of the offer to build it, but it's really the maintenance.
I think
and the
that's
continuation.
to Robert there to
So I
get a
think
chance
it's
to
great the
respond to that
community
one.
helps out,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
should. I mean, if we're relying on the government to take care of every single thing, we're in trouble, right? We need community involvement
Yes.
in things.
And I'd also
And-
like to, oh, I'm sorry, Robert.
No, go ahead.
Well, I'd also like to speak about how we're all really moving towards the same goal and having this in every
Absolutely.
neighborhood, and then specifically about how Pa'ani Kako is working towards that in two very specific ways. And one is through public-private partnership with the city to raise funds in the community, build them, and then gift them to the city. That's one route. And we're already in sort of the early exploration and discussion about a second project out in west or central Oʻahu, because we agree this needs to be everywhere. And the other way is through advocacy to the city, offering our insight, guidance, and opinion that every playground they refurbish, renovate, enlarge, or build needs to be inclusive. And statewide, actually, I'm in conversations with moms on neighbor islands who
And
want
again,
to
I think
bring
the
this
questions
here.
that we're getting from viewers really isn't so much about the funding for the park itself. It's the maintenance, the liability that could potentially come after that.
And if I
That
may,
seems the
that's
greater
that's
concern.
what does not work
Yeah.
with her plan, with your plan, because
Well, she
it's a
did address it
it's a
actually.
voluntary plan, and so we cannot depend that this organization is for 30 years or whatever as long as it's going to take to keep this maintenance up. Whereas when you have along Ala Moana, when you have all these landowners, developers, builders, they're the ones who are going to gain from more parkland and
I
better
address that?
parkland.
I guess you would explain that
And so,
differently.
I would really like a chance to address that.
other cities use mechanisms where there's tax increments, there's
I'm sorry, but you have to stop
business
giving
improvement.
incorrect information. The
I
developers,
didn't give any
yes,
incorrect.
The developers
I am not
provide-
giving incorrect information.
They
I'm saying
provide
that on a
funding.
long-term basis, you have to have mechanisms set up where the money is going to come from business districts, finances, so
I
that
think they have some specific responses to that.
so
Give
that
them
it's a
chance to do
long
so.
term. It's not it doesn't depend on whether or not a nonprofit exists or not.
But that's why we're doing it in public-private partnership and not a standalone private.
What's your responsibility?
501c3.
If you guys go out of, if you decide that if you move, if
It's
you
okay.
go
So
on,
I'll
what's your
answer- let me answer
responsibility?
that. So say they do. Say they fall apart. You're right. Your
Right.
government is responsible for maintaining. So you need to hold your government responsible.
Meanwhile, the businesses across the street are making out because they've
Can
got
I
a
address
park and
that?
all this
we
other
can't,
stuff.
we
Can
can't
I-
keep doing this if he
can
keeps
I-
saying that, because it's incorrect.
It
So
is
let's
correct.
let them respond.
So in other,
let's let
all other
let's let them
cities,
respond.
all other
This
cities
is
are
a people's
incorrect.
park for everybody. No,
respond.
we do those things. The developers provide funding for parks. It's park dedication, and it
Right.
goes into a special fund.
Yes.
And so you're talking about all this, we should be having them build parks all over the place. That is a system that's already set up.
I know.
It happens.
So
And
why
we
isn't
do
this
that.
park being built by somebody? Why is it going into Ala Moana instead of?
This is a park we already have. So yes, this is
Yes.
the city's responsibility, and we can use capital money to improve it also. It's a big picture. You
got
keep
money.
talking about
I
the
know
whole
Tiffany-
island, right? So
You wanted to respond.
Well, I want to back all the way up to earlier in the conversation where you were talking about these people and the developers, because I guess I'm these people. I'm the one sort of leading this effort, and I just want to be clear that I'm not a developer.
Yeah,
I'm
but your
not-
partner is.
Yes, Olana Pakala is part
Yes.
of a generations-long.
McNaughton
May I
and-
finish, please?
No,
I've
no,
given you
but
the
just-
courtesy.
Well,
Generations-long Hawaii
disclose.
family who built up a business from ground up, and they're often perceived as building only luxury. But I would tell you that right now the only project they're actively working on is a 200-unit affordable rental complex 3 blocks from Park Lane. So those are children we're hoping to welcome to the playground as well. She brings us I know a lot about inclusivity. I know what it is to be a mom of a special needs child.
Yes.
I don't know how to get things built. I don't know all the processes of the city. A project like this takes teamwork. It takes various skill sets, and she brings that. And I've watched her as a working mom of 2 young children, where time is precious, give so much of it to this project, and then be vilified in the press.
So you'd be
vilified.
against. So why would you be against putting this plan into the keiki zone at Kaka'ako?
So we have explored that option actually once it was raised, and it really comes down to one word, and that is safety. Kaka'ako, as we've seen even in the last couple months in the news about the dog attack where the mom had to hold the toddler overhead, well, a mom taking several children to a playground couldn't do that. A mom of a larger child couldn't do that.
What's the
And
safety issue?
the safety issue is the unpredictability and the unsafeness of that area demonstrated
Because
of the houseless issue, the recurrent and repetitive house. I don't know, did you have a chance to read the article in yesterday's paper?
So in other words,
Wait,
the
did you
state
have-
and the city have to finally come to grips with the fact that we have homeless, houseless people,
Yes.
and they need to
think we're
solve
getting
that
off
problem. Is that right?
I'm
And
really
that is your,
focused
that
on
is your,
play.
that is
You
your,
know, I'm
your
really
concern as
focused
to
on
why it wasn't in Kaka'ako. Let me get to some of
Right.
these viewer questions. There's some specifics, and we can get back to this. And there's some specifics about particular parts of the redevelopment. One about the having dogs in the park. People don't necessarily agree with that. And also fixing some of the other areas in the park before you enter into, say, adding a playground. For example, this a frequent user says they haven't finished fixing the restrooms at one end of the park. Should we be doing things like that first? And also maybe keeping more green space in the area. That's from a frequent user of the park for 30 years, he says, from Kalihi. So I think that is part of the hesitation, I think, with some of the people in how they view what should or shouldn't happen there. Are there certain areas that should be revitalized first before we enter into something else with some other
Well,
additions?
I don't see why we can't do both at the same time. So those comfort stations we're talking about, they are, one of them is finished and the other one is under renovation right now. So those are being done. We've fixed a lot of the walkways.
I think we've seen some of the video there. Of
The
that,
shower has been fixed in one of the areas, the concession stands. So there is a lot of maintenance that's going on. I mentioned the irrigation and tree planting. So
Here's a question from Jewel in Makiki. She says, is it not a part of the contract for new condos at the Ala Moana Mall that there would be upgrades to the park? Is that not part of it, or is this a misunderstanding?
Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be this park, right? That's what we were talking about. The developers are required to provide basically park dedication funds, and it goes into a park dedication special fund that DPR then manages what to do with those funds in terms of how it's going to be used in parks. Sometimes a developer actually creates a park, and so that's done quite often, such as out in I think one of the more recent ones was Haseko Park. I don't know what it's actually called right now, but the Haseko developer dedicated a huge park out in Ewa region. Same thing in the Kaka'ako area. They're creating parks, and that's so instead of just giving money, sometimes they actually create the park and then dedicate it over to the city.
As far as what the focus is for some of the redevelopment too, let's get to some. We have some imagery of some of the proposals to widening some of the areas and whatnot. I think we're going to take a look at first. And for some folks, this is considered a safety issue. Some folks, there's concerns about whether or not it's going to be taking up some of the parking or not. So let's take a look. We have some of the. This is the Pi'ikoi entrance here, and so what it would look like based on redevelopment, kind of opening it up there. And then I think we also have some other. Transitions that we can see with different areas of the park. Again, this is the Pi'ikoi entrance. This is what it would look like from what is before, and then what it would look like afterwards. I think we have another. Maybe we can take a look at the Makai area, I believe, of the park, and that's kind of along the waterfront area there, and we can see here what it looks like right now, where you see sort of the traffic going in, the parking, and then we see what it could change. You see a significant widening of the walkway area. What are your thoughts as to why this is a part of the design element?
These are some of the proposed projects for the entire park.
Okay.
Correct. The entrance that you saw, the first set of pictures, is that the idea behind it is to this is a grand park, and it should really have a grand entrance to it. And so we've decided to analyze widening the entrance area over the canal, because right now the bridges are quite narrow, and there's a kind of a serpentine way you get in. So widen it, the Pi'ikoi entrance, so when you come across, it's like, wow, we can enter the park. And so that's one of the proposals. We really haven't gotten any negative comments on that. I think that's well supported. The second set of pictures you showed, the idea was it's several-fold, right? We wanted to create a multi-use path. The path that's there along the seawall right now is somewhat narrow, and it's constricting in certain areas. Our intent was to widen it some and treat it a little more. Some people called it a promenade, right? You go in places and people walk along and turn it into a multi-use path. We still think that's a good idea because the narrowness of it right now is very constricting, and there's a lot of overflow onto it that people use and cause blockages. But the reality of that is it's been killed by council. They passed a law that's prohibiting us from actually widening it.
Now, is that the same case also on the Magic Island side? I believe there's a
everything
similar, yeah.
Makai of the road, basically, we cannot widen. Done by law. I mean, frankly,
okay.
That's council overstepping their duties. That's getting into executive matters.
So
and
those
really
are out,
done
but the Pi'ikoi
we
corridor
haven't
is
decided
still...
to fight it.
Okay.
The Pi'ikoi is, yes, that's Mauka of the road, so that's not an issue, and it's well supported.
So this is, I know, some of the comments from the panel here was that this was we're maybe getting a little bit off topic as far as talking about the houseless situation in Kaka'ako, and maybe that's part of the reason why it wasn't there. But this is some of the questions that are coming in. These are some of the comments that are coming in, because this is on a lot of people's minds, including Michael from Makiki, saying, how are homeless in the park going to be controlled when the park is improved? So not only concerns about what's happening in some of the other parks and how that may be affecting development and where we choose to develop, as well as what could possibly happen in Ala Moana Park if we go through these renovations, we add a new playground area, we still have an issue with that within our many communities. So what are your thoughts as far as really, for some people might say the elephant in the room, that this is an issue in many of these areas, and what is being discussed to address that?
Well, addressing the unsheltered homeless around the island is a huge topic that I would think is a whole other hour.
As far, but
discussion.
when you're facing in design and development
there's
elements,
a lot of,
that has to be part of your conversation as well.
There's a lot of that going on. The park rangers, I think, have provided a significant success in Ala Moana Regional Park itself. So I don't think the homelessness issue is a huge part at that park right now. So some of these things are much more suited to this area because we are doing a much better job of managing that there.
During our extensive period of studying safety and sustainability for our project, we reached out to HPD to see if there were innovative ways that we could partner with them to increase safety in the nighttime hours, because the park rangers will help do that during the day. And what they communicated to us is they really needed a workspace and a clean restroom at night. So part of what we're building is a workspace which will have Wi-Fi and a desk and light and access to a clean restroom at night and a parking spot. And so by giving a place that is attractive for them to work and support their work, we're hoping to increase the presence at night hours, which would be additive for the whole park, not just the playground. So that's a way we're trying to contribute to improving the entire park.
But that could be done by the city.
I want to let Eugene jump in here. You're being very thoughtful, listening to, as this discussion unfolds.
I mean, it comes back to full circle around in terms of due diligence in the EIS. What is our examination of these? And have they been laid out so that public can vet what has been studied? I appreciate all the work that Mrs. Vara has done as far as your group in terms of the research, but where is that available for public view that we can understand? Help us understand what you've looked at so that we can understand why you want the park, that type of park, at that area. Life of the Land has presented with proposals of other areas where a playground and parks are needed, and so that's those things are on the mind.
Oh no, go ahead.
And the issue of safety comes in many forms. Even in the presentation, in terms of even though things ocean side of the Ala Moana Beach Park Road or what have you, cannot be touched in the city ordinance. But the other side, in terms of safety, in terms of the parking plans, has that really been studied? Studies showing that parallel versus perpendicular, the amount of accidents and stuff. And the thing is, though, also the issue in terms of the promenade. It's not so much that it's mixed use, but who's going to regulate it? Who's going to maintain it? And who's going to enforce? I mean, even now with the dog park, the issue is that dogs are, by law, supposed to be on leash. But how many times that we're out there surfing or at the beach and dogs are off leash?
And on the beach.
And on the beach. And who's enforcing that? And there are serious health issues, and even in Australia, they're outlawed to have dogs on the beach because of the health issues. And so these are things that need to be vetted, needed to be discussed, and brought together as far as what are compromises that we can work on.
And I want you to respond to that, but I just want to reinforce a little bit to make sure we get to some of these viewer questions, which is along the same thought process, so it'll lead to your answer. So Randy from Manoa saying, why did the mayor enter into the playground development agreement without completing the draft EIS? And also another one, why isn't a complete description of the park in the second draft of the EIS? What is there that seems to come straight from the what is there that seems to come straight from the Star Bulletin article? I'm not sure if I read that right, but the point being, they have some concerns as to what's being revealed, explained, included in the EIS and for public view.
Right. So I'm not sure. I know I don't necessarily agree with you 100% on that. The public input that we've received for this has been much more than we would ever receive on normal projects like this. So we've had at least 3 public meetings. You've invited us to your own personal meetings where we've attended, and we've received comments at 2 different comment periods. So we're receiving and analyzing comments from all over the place. Remember, we're just in the EIS phase. So really what we're analyzing is the impacts to everything. And of course that comes with, you're right, cultural, economic, actual environmental, as in marine biology, flora, fauna, all those things are being analyzed. And one of the reasons we went out with a second EIS is because we realized, based on some of the comments we received, we needed to analyze some other part culturally a little closer. And so we've done that and gone through them. I guess the objection I have a little bit is, in the end, there still has to be a decision that's made, and we go one way or the other. And just because that decision isn't what you want doesn't mean we're not listening, right? We're analyzing the pros and cons of all these different projects, the different pieces, the different parts, and trying to come up with the best solution to the purpose and need of this park, which has been clearly stated on what we need. In the end, we'll decide whether the environment is impacted significantly or not. Then after that, it still comes down to executing specific projects, which goes through a whole nother process, right? We have to say, put the money towards it. You got to get the permits, so we've got all other kind of stakeholders looking at it. So this is all still going to be vetted in many ways. So what you're saying is, we have received a lot of input. You've received a lot of input from us. We don't necessarily agree 100%, but we have to agree to disagree sometimes, but move on. So I think this has been a well-vetted project, and we've gotten a lot of input, and we've made changes. We've made changes based on a lot of input.
I have a question in response to something that Ms. Vero said. Have we really come to the point in our island that we will not do something because it's difficult? I mean, when John F. Kennedy said we were going to go to the moon, we didn't know how to do anything. It was impossible. And within 9 years, 10 years, we were at the moon. So, is it that because it's unsafe right now at Kaka'ako, that means that that's off the table? Does it mean that because that's a hard thing to do, that we just say, oh, well, can't do that, and then go do something else?
None of us have said
how do we
Kaka'ako is off the table.
How do we tackle, so how do we go into that and figure out as a community, how do we help the people who are there? How do we create, and Gina and I were talking about this in terms of the medicine and medical field. How do we deal with these issues so that we don't lose Kaka'ako? That Kaka'ako becomes a viable place to live and to play and for a park.
Again, I'm not sure why we're talking about Kaka'ako. Nobody says anything about Kaka'ako.
Because
we're going to work on Kaka'ako.
Because there's a keiki zone already set up there.
That's fine. There can be one there and at Ala Moana.
Yeah, well, there could be, but also you could take this and you could put it over there and leave Ala Moana and its open space alone, because you have 35,000 people coming in over the next few years. Let's create another park, another destination.
So let me ask you this. Do you feel like then that needs to be addressed before some of these park renovations or upgrades or changes happen?
During, you know, we can't just give up because there's this issue here. If we feel, like you were saying, see, you could say the EIS says this and it has this impact and that impact, but all that means is, well, you could do it, you can't do it, but then there's a decision, like you said. And the decision is, should it be done? What should be done? And based on what? And so here we have this opportunity to develop Kaka'ako and to make it another destination where they already have the Children's Discovery Center. And so why not take this idea, which I think, if you want to put these things over there, put them over there, and leave the regional park alone and make another destination, because we have so many new people coming into the area. So now we have more space, more destination, more places for people to play. And so I don't disagree with the goal. I disagree with how they're trying to get to the goal.
So I don't think anybody's giving up on Kaka'ako. I'm certainly not. It's going to take unprecedented collaboration across our community and probably some innovative solutions to really solve that problem. And I think just being at this table and having a sense of our community, I think we can accomplish that. But I don't see any short-term or even medium-term sustainable solutions that would make it safe enough to invite children, including our most vulnerable, into that space to play. And so, 9 or 10 years to get to the moon. For us at this table, 2 or 3 or 4 years goes by like that, right? For children, every month is important. Every year is invaluable. We can't spend 5 or 8 years securing Kaka'ako before we build a playground, because there are children who will leave childhood without having a chance to play or will die.
And you keep talking about more people coming into the area.
Yes.
Right. So what we're trying to do is make more parts of Ala Moana Regional Park useful for those people, because there's a lot of dead space.
We need more park space. It's not dead space.
There is a lot
it's
of dead
used
space.
Have you ever been down there on the 4th of July? Have you ever been down there when the surf is up? Come on,
some days a
it's
year.
used.
Sure.
So I think we need to let's continue this discussion a little bit with Ala Moana Beach Park. And I would imagine some of the comments that we're getting would fall into the comment period that I think closed in March. Is that correct, for this particular EIS? Is that
the second
EIS. So this, and I'm sure this is all part of the discussion when you look at what some of the comments coming in. Ala Moana has been fined for families for 50 years. I believe this is a money grab from this person's opinion. Leave the park alone. Ala Moana is a beach park for local families, should remain the same. Adding these upgrades will only take away the green space that Oʻahu desperately needs. And with the expansion, they're talking about parking here. There's issues with people being concerned about parking. John from Pearl City, and also Kahala and Dan from Pearl City asking about the loss of parking in the area. So I think this really lends to the challenge that you have as far as how much public input do we need here, and how much time, and do we feel like there's been enough transparency? Do we feel like there's been enough accessibility for the community to be able to input enough?
So, with the overwhelming response that you've received, there are issues that it's a massive project, and I applaud the city administration and for you to take on this. The thing is, though, it's all interconnected. Even the issue of the sand replenishment, there are issues in terms of the sites that they've chosen for the sand replenishment, in terms of the drift from Ala, and there have been issues as far as what about the contaminants in the sand. Now we'd be placing that sand on the beach where there'd be children playing, children eating the sand, and animals eating the sand. and possibly, in terms of how would you be able to clean the sand, which there isn't.
But we're not
really.
going to put any sand that has contaminations in it.
Well,
So
the thing is,
don't
though,
say those things, because people hear that and then they start thinking, oh, there's contaminants in
No,
the sand.
the thing
We
is
will
that-
not be putting contaminated
Exactly.
sand on the park.
But the thing is, though, that needs to be vetted, that needs to be presented.
It
I was
has
at
been.
the Sea Engineering, their samples are not adequate. I mean, in terms of
You have opportunity to dispute that and prove it.
we have, and so we're waiting for the replies from the EIS. So again, it's sort of the EIS is a great forum, and we're waiting by bated breath as far as what the replies will be and what the changes will be. And even in the mayor's statement himself says that it's going to be a work in progress. I appreciate that, and it's massive. But it's all interconnected. Even the safety issue, how much of that overflow from Kaka'aku in terms of being able to manage that, and that won't flow in. I mean, there are homeless that leave the park at night and come back the next day. I mean, there's some regulars on Magic Island when I go out to surf there or paddle there, and they're there again. Are the park rangers have the capacity or capabilities or jurisdiction to be able to enforce that?
Well, also, just being homeless doesn't mean you can't use the park.
Exactly.
You can't use it at certain hours,
Right.
So as usual, time is flying by in this hour. We only have a few minutes left. We want to make sure that everybody kind of gets sort of encapsulate their thoughts before we start to wrap things up. So I want to turn it to you, Tiffany. What would you say is the best argument for allowing the playground at Ala Moana Park?
This is already a well-used, well-loved park. It's enormous, 119 acres. We're asking for one behind a concession and a public restroom in a fairly unutilized place. That will be the first opportunity for all children on this island to play together in a place their families already frequent and have celebrations at and spend holidays in. The community wants this, the broader community. There are segments of our community who do not, and I appreciate having all voices. That's a healthy community when we have all voices, some who don't agree. This is important for building community from young child time up. When we know each other, we take care of each other. And when we learn about each other when we're very young, when we're free to ask questions, and for example, when kids would ask me, what's that tube why is she eating through a tube? I would explain and it was normal. Yeah. This is the chance, this is the time, and this is the place.
And we want to make sure we let everybody comment. So what do you feel is the strongest argument against having this park, this playground at Ala Moana Park?
I would simply say, I want to see inclusivity at all of our community parks. I don't believe the family in Kahuku, Mililani, Waimanalo, out in Eva, after dinner, after mom and dad have worked all day, that they're going to pack everybody up in the car to drive all the way down to Ala Moana so they can swing somebody on a swing. But if that same equipment is in their community park, where they know the people around them, where their friends and family are around them, that's where we need to put this immediately. And that's a quicker fix than this developing of the park. So I would say that's the first thing, and then I would say let's build, and then that's my, and then I would also want to say let's get the water stuff at Ala Moana Beach Park.
You talk about what would satisfy you as far as concerns for the master plan and having the community input?
Well, again, it's sort of listening to the people, and I think that the city and Mr. Koenig has done an admirable job in terms of that. Now it's sort of seeing what the results are. The issues are the particulars, and again, it's the devil's in the details. Again, the park references the Star Advertiser articles. It provides no substance as far as what the plans are in presenting. If you read the EIS, the section on the playground has a paucity of information about it. Only that what was available, and the links are to those new Star Advertiser articles. So again, it's sort of all of a sudden it's thrown in there, and that's why the emotional response is this something going to be just swept in under the table because it's in this massive plan, or where are the details? Where are things that we can access to be able to make appropriate decisions. Same with the others.
And this is right in the center of your plate, so I want to give you the final comment here. We've got about a minute left.
Well, thank you. Yes, no, this is fantastic. I mean, my job would be so much easier if we always all agreed, but unfortunately that never happens in anything that I do and any of the projects that we do. So this discussion has to happen. I feel comfortable that it's been a solid and open and good conversation. Some of this has to do a little bit with the misunderstanding of what an EIS is, right? So you're not going to get fully vetted designed plans in an EIS. Usually it's about 30% design, and then as long as that shows that you're not going to have a huge environmental impact, then you move forward and you develop those designs later, and that happens with community inputs similarly. I think, you know, I fully agree with you that all our parks need work and need attention, and they have. We've fixed you know, over 100 playgrounds, over 300 play court surfaces, over 80 comfort stations all around the island. So.
And that information is accessible online,
yes,
as far as the EIS. So thank you so much, all of you. I think everybody here is generally accessible, and no doubt more questions to come. So thank you so much for all of your time. Mahalo for joining us, and we thank our guests, Robert Croning, Director of the Department of Design and Construction for the City and County of Honolulu, Salvatore Lanzalotti, retiree photographer and concerned citizen, Tiffany Vara, Executive Director of Pa'anika Ko, and Eugene Lee, a member of Ala Moana. Thank you again to all of you. All right, next week on Insights, the high cost of prescription drugs. What can be done to make them affordable to those who need them the most? I'm Laurie Amata for Insights on PBS Hawaii. Ohui ho.